them synchronously. So I keep getting messages that there are chats. Is that within this Hangout that people are sending messages?
Yes. On the left-hand side where you find that toolbox, if you look a little bit higher, there's like a little dialog box.
Oh, okay, I see.
But you can't, if you're on an iPad, I've never been able to figure it out, but if you're on a real computer, you can see it.
Okay. Oh, now I'm getting all the jokes.
So, thanks for those of you that are joining us on air. This is our second co-conspirator meeting for the OCLMooc, and we're so excited you've all agreed to be involved. My name's Rhonda Jessen, and I'm just going to give you a sense of what our agenda is going to be like for today. We're going to talk about kind of what we've done since the last hangout that we had 2 weeks ago, what kind of needs to happen in the near future, what we're looking for co-conspirators to do in the next little bit. And then at the end, we're going to kind of discuss this. Verena was just saying we've been inundated with people who want to participate who might not be able to participate at the co-conspirator level. So what will we call those and how those people and how will they get involved? So that's kind of what we're going to talk about tonight. And we'll start by saying since our last we had a hangout meeting 2 weeks ago, no biggie if you weren't there. Since then, we've kind of finalized, Verena and I are organizing the first week to kind of, because nobody wanted to, but also to kind of give you a sense of how it's done. We've finalized all of the events for the first week. So the MOOC starts on September 24th, which is a Wednesday. Our week starting Wednesday instead of Monday. So the first day, we're going to do a hangout on air just like this. So there'll be some participants that are having a conversation. OCLMooc participants can watch it broadcast live because this is now streaming live on our YouTube channel. They'll be able to answer questions, ask questions there, ask questions in our G+ community, ask questions in our Twitter feed. And the topic of the hangout is CMOOC stories. And many of us belong to a community called the Post-at-MOOC community. And members of that community, and possibly some people not from that community, are going to join this hangout, and they're going to talk about their experience in these kind of connectivist MOOCs, why they joined, what they got out of it, and best practices. So that's going to be the first event. It's going to be the first day, which from our experience probably will be fairly intimidating for people who it's their first MOOC. So we're kind of easing them in. We're really excited. The second day, our very first webinar, Verena's going to host Dave Fournier, who you may or may not know is kind of one of the gurus of CMOOCs. And he's going to be talking about surviving and thriving in a MOOC. I'm sure he's renamed it by now. And that's going to be our first webinar. So that'll be on Thursday, September 25th. And then our first Twitter chat will be Tuesday, September 30th. And we're going to schedule weekly Twitter chats every Tuesday. So that's sort of the first week. We have things finalized for there. We've been adding information on the blog. We've now got a calendar on the blog with these information, or with these events. We've got the Twitter feed hooked up. We have some updated co-conspirator bios, but we love yours because most of you that are in here right now, we don't have your bios yet. And our plan is, we don't want to have too many posts in that community. Our plan is to do about 1 post a week. So last week we put Susan's awesome haiku deck up, and we're going to start kind of to talk about this. So we'll do an update this week as well. And there's also a page for learning artifacts.
Oh, yeah. That's what I was wondering.
Go, Allison, you had a question.
Oh, no, just I was wondering if there was a place already for to keep the artifacts of the Twitter feed and things like that.
Oh, perfect. And I think while I talk, Verena's going to be shoving links in there if you haven't already seen it. Yes, she is. Yay! Yes, of course, you're all co-conspirators. You know what? Actually, if you say you're a co-conspirator and you show up, then you're a co-conspirator. And we hope you'll help. Not just wear the nice name tag and not play, but yeah, of course you're all co-conspirators. So we've also started advertising a little bit. I was reluctant to advertise too much before we had some content. And we said this last time. Verena and I consciously sort of built the framework for this, but didn't build all the content, partially because we didn't want it to be the Verena and Rana show, which we could do, but also because one of the goals of this is to not only teach people some skills about open and connected learning, but teach them how they could do it themselves. So we really are hoping to have lots of co-conspirators so that people, even people who have no experience doing this, can join us and get some experience. So we really don't have a lot of, other than the weekly Twitter feed or the Twitter conversation and the events we scheduled for week one, we don't have a lot of events scheduled. But we have started advertising. I put a request in for them to advertise us on the website connectivistmoocs.org. I put in a request for them to advertise our event on Connected Educator Month, which is out of the U.S. And this year they've got a kind of a switch in focus. Last year was very American focused, although they did do some international stuff. This year they're recognizing that there's kind of a need for this globally, and Connected Educator Month is in October. And so they are opening things up more broadly to a more obvious global audience. So we've advertised the MOOC itself on there, as well as our first webinar that's going to be with Dave Cornier. And I also advertised us on globaleducationconference.com. And the Global Education Conference itself takes place in November, but the same thing, they're actually advertising events throughout the year, so I threw us up there as well. And if you haven't already been doing so, and many of you have already been doing this in a really great way, please do start spreading the word to the people you work with, learn with, teach with, because we'd love to have lots of people joining us, either as participants or as co-conspirators.
Rhonda, I did notice that there are 556 views on the Haiku deck. I mean, you know, I know we just got the YouTube thing going, but I noticed that there are 556 views. What I've been telling people to do, I've been posting it on Twitter and trying to hit as many hashtags as possible, but you know, I don't know if I'm doing it every day. I try to do it when I'm thinking of doing it, and I also posted it on Facebook, just on my regular site, and said, pass on to everyone you know. Will you please do that? So I think if everybody does that, or even if we want to do, you know, a bit of both, I think do that and then do, we keep on getting these people in. Even if we do that and then we do just posting your OCLMooc on WordPress, if we do both, you know, spread it both ways, I think we can get a lot of people interested anyway. I've also talked to people from our school board and you know, just pass the word that way to just let them know that this is something that's happening at night, it's free, it's a great PD, and so if you can let people know that way too, I think is, you know, again, saying it's open to everyone. I mean, really, I've let all my friends know that it is available, and I know a number have signed up already who are not educators. So I think that's really important.
Fantastic. I'm going to pause again because I always feel like I'm talking nonstop. So like Verena said, yesterday she went on and she was on a bit of a recruitment drive, but the other thing is that if this is a new experience for people, they might say, oh, I'm interested in being a co-conspirator, but not quite sure what that means. So we did have people take ownership of each week last planning meeting, and today Verena's been doing matchmaking and kind of pairing people up and putting them in a week. And if you're with us here today and you haven't already been signed up for a week, you could either and add your name to
I'm sorry, can you say it one more time? Sorry, I didn't hear what you were saying. The reception stopped when you were telling us what to do.
I noticed kids to get off Wi-Fi. So right now we're kind of joining a week. If you wanted to join a week and be co-responsible for a week, I can see that I'm kind of. Can you catch me, or am I getting all herky-jerky for you?
Okay for me.
No, I hear you now.
So we're at the point right now where we have. Oh, good. we have some people who have signed up and said, oh yeah, I want to be involved coordinating week 1 or coordinating week 2. But we also have lots of co-conspirators who weren't kind of specifically, didn't have any duties. So Verena was playing matchmaker for the last couple of days and pairing people up, especially people she knew, oh, you're an EdCamp person, do you want to be involved in the last week where we're doing EdCamp stuff? So if you're not already involved in helping plan a week and you know that's something you want to be involved in, I'm sure Verena has shared along the side here, or she's about to do so again, the planning document so you can stick your name in there. And just because you sign up doesn't mean you're responsible for the whole thing. If you're a little apprehensive, I bet Susan's and Aaron are going to jump in here and echo this. Even if you're a little apprehensive and you've never done it before, we're really encouraging you to try it, even if it's something you've never done before.
Okay.
One of the things I did this week is I spoke with Barb Brown. She just finished her PhD through U of C in educational technology, and she's working at U of C right now. And she did her whole dissertation on leadership in educational technology and promoting leadership. And she's agreed to do a video for us at least and try and do a session for us, asynchronous session. At some point, she said she'd try and line it up with my week 2, or if it lines up with something. So sort of the research she's already done, she could take that and like fix it to whatever we need it to be. So she's agreed to do at least a video for us and potentially a workshop or a presentation.
Fantastic. And we needed to tentatively kind of put some structure together. So tentatively we said that the synchronous events would take place on Tuesdays, Twitter chats would take place synchronous on Thursdays, Twitter chats on Tuesdays, but we certainly can have more than one event during a week. The idea with the OCLMooc is that you don't have to do everything. You just take in what appeals to you. So if we have multiple events during a week, that just gives people more things to choose from.
Yeah. I also contacted Paige Woodard, who is a student and is willing to talk about digital citizenship because that's really her passion and where she's gone. And she thinks she can do it. So I'm just waiting for a confirmation because she's back at university in her schedule as well. So I think that's what I'm trying to do is, look at, well, what are the topics that I'm supposed to cover or we're supposed to cover, because there's a couple of us, and what can we do? What are some possibilities? So I'm guessing that's where you want us to go now, is really to look at, okay, this is your week, try to plan it as best you can and be creative and do what you'd like, sort of, during that week. Is that true? Is that accurate?
Yeah, exactly. In an ideal world, if we could nail down some of the events that are going to take place for at least each week, that would be great, because that helps with advertising. If somebody's never done a MOOC before and they're thinking, ooh, maybe I want to participate, maybe not, but we don't have a lot of details on what the events are going to be, it's harder for them to decide. Mm-hmm. So probably your next step in terms of planning your week would be to identify who you want for your speaker, maybe 1 or 2 people, and then approach them. And our feedback really has been really positive. Everyone we've approached to be involved has been involved. Right away they've said, yeah, we're really interested. So also we throw it out there, Rena and I have fairly good networks. If there's somebody that you're interested but you don't know them, we probably know them, or we know somebody who knows them. So just the fact that it's some stranger out there, don't let that stop you. You can invite them to present too. I mentioned last time, that's what I did last year with OCLMooc. I was in charge of the month for digital citizenship, and I really wanted Kathy Cassidy, who's a grade 1 teacher in Saskatchewan, to present. She does amazing, and I just threw it out there, and she agreed to present.
Okay. And did we book Alec for a time? I know.
Susan, I need you to Alec agreed that he's going to present during that Digital Leadership Week, but he needed to confirm a date, so I was leaving that up to you to do. Okay. He's traveling that week, but he's keen to present. And if you didn't notice in the chat, I'm going to point out that Maureen is interested in being involved in that Digital Leadership Week, and what Maureen does for Edmonton Public is she works on leadership development, so she'll be an awesome asset for you.
Oh, fantastic. It'd be great to have that contact information as well, you know, phone numbers or whatever. I don't know if we want a separate doc for that kind of thing, but it would be good to have, you know, all the contact numbers of people that we've contacted, not just their Twitter handle. Sometimes it's good to have a contact
number. Yeah.
I just realized though, once you're talking about Paige Woodward, who I know because she did my MOOC with me originally too. So she was in Dawn's class, yeah. But we don't have any students, and I remember my first MOOC we had a student-run week. So we had students presenting and students doing all the facilitation, which was extremely difficult, and I don't know if that's a good idea, but maybe thinking about how we could integrate students into this might be the point of that. Like, could they do some asynchronous things or digital artifacts or whatever? I don't know. Like, how will we integrate that? How could we encourage them to be involved, and how could we learn from them? I just realized.
I've just been doing. I've been doing some interesting things recently. I had a 4-part webinar that I did for a client, and the subject of it was how to present online meetings and webinars. So it was kind of a goofy circular thing, but we had 2 offshoot sessions that I called master classes, basing them on what I saw at conservatories of music, where somebody would prep something, and then they would present it in front of a small group, and we would critique it in a very positive way. That could be one thing. And also, I remember Cogdog, Alan, doing the blog posting through OCLMooc. Setting up something like that might be very, very useful.
Mm-hmm. And what you're saying is really attractive. One of the things that Sean, who's not here, Sean mentioned last week, he was really keen on being clear that we're inviting learners, not just educators, because of course already many of you were saying there are some non-educators who are coming. But yeah, it would be fantastic if we could have student involvement.
Well, I mean, I don't think there'd be a problem with having, I think, how can you say that?
Asynchronous.
Just call it the A word.
Yeah. So we will, you know, I'm sure we can have students involved, whether, you know, it's really having them create. I can certainly see for digital citizenship, Erin and I could work at that in having students involved in creating something somehow, some way. If we did have even some blog areas that they could put some postings in or videos that they want to create. I think there could be many ways that we could involve students, maybe not directly in that leadership, but in a you know, a leadership role in a different way. Yeah, I can see that we can do that for sure.
Or creating activities where if people are working with students or students themselves can do something within the classroom and sort of share their success stories. Like stuff that they can learn during the MOOC but then take back to the classroom and try out right away.
Yeah, nice.
Sorry, the students.
And Marie mentioned Center for Global Ed. Her and I are both involved. Yeah, either that or teachers are taking the MOOC, and then the teacher goes back to the classroom and does some with their classes based on what they've learned. And I was mentioning, Maureen mentioned the Center for Global Education. We're both involved in that and do a lot of student video conferencing. So we'll connect with Terry about maybe how they could be involved as well.
Did we decide on whether we're going to use Adobe or Blackboard Collaborate? Did we decide on that?
No, I'm concerned at this point at kind of nailing down the set. And there's some questions we're still waiting for answers on. So no, we haven't done that yet, but I'm not really worried about that.
I just want to play a little bit before we, whatever, you know, whichever we use, I want to be able to play around with it a little bit before we actually jump in on the night before. Or, I mean, I can do that too, but I don't want to have to do that, right? So it would be nice to know what platform so we can tell whoever that that's what we're going to be using. That would be helpful.
Yeah, we'll probably nail that down in the next week or two.
Okay.
And it probably will be Collaborate. We really are still seeing, although Collaborate's easier to use, it looks like more Albertans have access to Blackboard, even though we're just kind of working that piece out. So in terms of planning, I know Vereena's been awesome at sharing links and stuff. One master planning document where we can schedule for things, and then each week it's a hyperlink, and those are linked into a specific planning document for that week. It's just sort of a little bit of a template. You can change it if you need to. In the document where you'd be with your other fellow co-conspirators and figuring out, okay, this is kind of the events that we're planning. These are the resources and things like that. So at this point, what we do as a co-conspirator is try and figure out or start working on events during your week. And the other thing responsible for as somebody doing a week is the intro post. Of course, we'll help you with if you need help. But there'll be an intro post. So Verena and I are working on an intro post, kind of a welcome to OOE, but also here's some things about being connected and learning in a connectivist environment, and suggested activities. As it's a CMooc, it's not like the XMooc I just with Adobe that said you must do this, and then you must do this, and then you can't do step 3 if you haven't done step. It's really not like that. I'm going to pause and see if anybody has any questions.
You know, for me, the biggest concern is maybe, the teams getting together and having the opportunity to work together. So that was why I was adamant about trying to make teams so everyone had someone to work with. That was a good start. But then also number 2, if you need to book somebody to speak, that has already been proven difficult with timing. So the sooner we get on that, those are the only 2 things that need to be done. Like, who's your team and who are you, like, if you're booking someone to speak, do it immediately. The other things, the content, how you're going to do activities and stuff, it isn't really as important. It's just the people that are important. Unless there's other things that you think are crucial to book, but timing, I've noticed, is already a problem.
So are we going to do what Paul had suggested there, collate kind of blogs like they did in OCLMooc? You know, like we have anybody who's signed up, they can do one of 2 things. They can, you know, get up on Twitter beforehand if they can, and we have kind of a how to do that.
To have a blog.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, here's the thing. I have the instructions, and I haven't followed them yet. But I know I can ask CogDog if I can't. So we will have that soon, hopefully this week.
Okay, great.
I'm sorry, what are we having this week? You're coming in and out, Rhonda, so I'm confused. Yeah.
Yeah, you know what? I'm going to let you talk. So remind my children that they're getting off the Wi-Fi, and I'll be right back.
Okay, Susan, ask your question again, and then I'll try to figure out what she said we're doing in the next week.
Well, I had really asked, are we going to, you know, collate the blogs and like they did in the other, like we did in OCLMooc, like we had all the Twitter handles together, so we knew who was on Twitter, who was also in would be.
Yeah. So I had a question about that. Do you want to do it? Should we just have one Google Doc and just have a list of everybody? Do we want to make a Twitter list? They did Twitter lists, and then they had to like keep making them when they got too big. That's what they did for the names. But I never ended up following any of them because I like it better when I can actually see. I don't know, when name and Twitter name.
And the page with the Google Plus will appear naturally, won't it?
The Google Plus page we do have, and then that's a really good point, Allison, because it's, do we have one for the co-conspirators and one for everyone else? And I think Rhonda was setting that up this week, and I think that's a good idea because otherwise you're going to be confusing everybody. But the blogs you can do through an RSS feed, but I know not to do them on our Google. Don't ever do blogs RSS feed on a Google site, by the way, because the first thing that comes up is advertisements if the person doesn't post, and the advertisements are completely inappropriate. I learned this in a high school situation. Don't do that ever. But we could do an RSS feed, and as soon as we get the blogs, and that would be easier. I just put them all in.
Yeah, I like the Google Docs idea because then you can go back and see it all in one area. And I do like separating the co-conspirators because I'd like to know who they are so we can contact them a little bit, if we need to. But I do like that idea of it being in a Google Doc because then you can go back and it's pretty easy to, if we do something post OCLMooc, to go back and look who's on that doc and invite them to whatever. That would be great.
The only thing about putting the blogs rather than, I mean, I like the Google Plus identity page, but the blogs, I don't know what the alternative is, but there's some like pinboard type sites where you just have one icon. So instead of seeing reams of things, you can just go in. I'm not sure how to say that.
No, you could. Like, we can make it just like a list, or you can have it like, there's so many different sites. You're right. So maybe we should think about
just
how we want to curate.
Of being able to link to the same blog through the different tools, then people would be able to assess which ones, for themselves as educators, they would prefer to use for certain types of linking. Like, is it, what, are you trying to follow an idea like you're trying to follow in a MOOC where there's like a time frame and people are gathering around things? Or is this like blogs and artifacts that my students are going to be making? Is this more that I need it to be with more like static? I don't know exactly where I'm going with that. But
well, you're saying different tools can be used
the blog can be there all the time, but we can have it linked through more than one of the pages so that people can reflect on how they can search for the blogs and how accessible different ideas were in the blogs. So maybe when they're starting to get students to put their work online, they can see that some things go better when we're looking at like a chronological feed of how like an inquiry is building, as it might in a MOOC. But then other times, if I'm doing more documentation of learning, then I might want to have it in a different type of display that's more, I go back to my graphic and it's my portfolio type thing, something like that.
I also, just a suggestion, when we do put up the co-conspirators, maybe having a picture there beside our name, I think that would be helpful. Yeah. It's just easy to go in and have even if it's our Twitter picture or whatever, I don't know if everybody's using a face on Twitter, but it's nice to have the picture beside the name, especially for new people who wouldn't know. I know that didn't happen till a little later for us in some other MOOCs. So, yeah, I mean, just a thought.
One thing that Alex suggested to me that I should do with my first MOOC, and I did, but he didn't do, but I have to say I've done every time since, it takes a lot of work, is you have one person create a daily summary of what happened that day, and I did it, the most recently I just used, what's the tool where you just pull everything together in a Twitter chat? Why am I forgetting my...
Storify?
Yeah, Storify. And so I just did a daily Storify and then pulled everywhere because, as we well know in MOOCs, it's everywhere. So I pulled in some things that were trending or things that were exciting. But that's the hardest part as a facilitator. But on the other hand, people were then able to jump in at different points, and they had a better understanding of what was going on. So if I did it daily, it engaged and kept people engaged and kept the interaction kind of going. Yeah.
Well, maybe some of those people who are willing to be co-conspirators but want to be involved it'd be
Yeah.
a great thing for them to do, to be that's one role they could take, is to be the storifier.
It is. It's like the observer or the documenter or the summarizer, and then you just can ask those questions, guiding questions, and it's actually really helpful for when you do it with high school students too, in a small contained kind of MOOC.
And Storify, this is something that I learned when I was trying to go back to a MOOC that had already happened. Storify will only go back so long. So if you don't create something, it actually becomes...
Long every time.
Mm-hmm.
Every time I use Storify, you can go back less in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Although I did learn to add, I added an Storify add-in to Chrome. And so if you can't see your timeline in Storify, you can actually go in your Twitter feed in Chrome and you can cheat and go back further. But I agree, Alison, it's very frustrating.
Do you think that I'm asking this group, the co-conspirators need like some weekly must-haves, like kind of the course design or the course blueprint? Because I think if they had that, they could just go and do whatever they want. Like you need your team, you need your one weekly person to do some kind of hangout or host, and then other than that, activities. What do you think? I don't know. I'm asking you guys. You want something like it doesn't mean. Well, maybe we have to say there's some must-haves and then there's some options.
Yeah, that's helpful. It's just helpful in the planning.
For a second about Storify, and that's the Storify is great, and I think it's wonderful when people want to Storify. But I really don't like the idea of having a must Storify, because that openness and people doing things in different places and trying to figure out where the places are, to me, is part of the inherent part of what we're doing. And if people become too reliant on somebody else who is going to Storify, or not doing some of that sort of searching or understanding for themselves, that they have to follow trails or figure out their own rabbit holes. So I have a bit of a reluctance in having an appointed historian or an appointed person to document an artifact, because I think in some ways you then lose some of the really critical elements of doing things in the way that we're talking about doing them.
Well, and to jump on that, Maureen, I like what you're saying, but I think we should start with the Storify, because sometimes people don't even know what the potential is out there if they've never been there. You know, like, so if at the beginning someone's demoing, these are all the places you can look, it gives them that opportunity to try it for themselves.
Okay, that works for me, to do it as a demo, to model and say, you know, here's one of the things you can do. And I have nothing against Storify. I just am cautious about saying every week we'll have a Storify and you can kind of rely upon this, so that in a way you don't have to do the work. So if the first few weeks, week 1, week 2, maybe even week 3, we set it up so a Storify happened, or there was some modeling, that works. That's teaching, that's learning, that's sharing, that's collaborating. But to sort of have that as a requirement, and as I say, to have an appointed historian, it causes me some anxiety, although I'm certainly willing to go with whatever you decide.
I think we have to think about the audience, and like for the rhizomatic experience, I would oppose a historian at all costs, for example. I totally agree. And I like the way you talked about that transition piece, because we have the issue or the problem that I think I'm trying to solve is, how do we engage those learners in online environments and teach them about networked learning, who've never had the confidence or taken those risks before? That's always the problem for me. How do we encourage them?
What about the possibility of people offering to mentor?
Oh, add that into it. But for me, when I read about MOOCs, the number one thing that you hear every time is, I was lost. I didn't know where to go. I got so frustrated I gave up. And it's not only MOOCs, anything educational technology-wise. That's the first thing I guess I hear as well. So that's why I think, I agree with you, as many scaffolding options as possible, and then pull back. Maybe I should have phrased it more that way. Like, how about we scaffold it and then purposely pull back in our design?
Well, and
I think you're really onto something very.
I like the
Let me
idea of
jump in on
also
this one,
having.
Verena. I think you're. Sorry, we're on top of each other. I'll stop. You go first.
No, you go. Go ahead, Paul.
Okay, now nobody's going first. Thanks. Verena, exactly what you just said. I think it's people going into a new environment are a little skeptical, a little scared of being lost, being confused. So the more we can do at some level of scaffolding without necessarily holding hands all the way is a really good thing. In the MOOCs that I've really appreciated, including ETMOOC and the Exploring Personal Learning Networks MOOC, those were very well organized from those front page intros each week, and that was a good starting point. From there, we were able to go to different places. And I think of a model that I don't think we can pull off, but it's something to shoot for. When I took some online learning a few years ago in formal academic settings, they had virtually people around the clock. They would sort of check in, and if people were lost, they could, with just a few lines, help them out a bit. And with a bunch of us in different time zones, it's possible we could get some of that, if not total, around the clock kind of quick answers for people that get stuck, and then the learners themselves become part of the process, answering the questions once they get familiar with it. So I'm done.
Even if you had synchronous and asynchronous times, so that you tried to have a couple of times in a day where there might be a mentor, contact person, whatever, and other times, well, that's just not possible to have that coverage.
Yeah, and I like the idea of, as we've kind of moved towards maybe having some sort of curated thing at the beginning, I also like the idea of having multiple. Maybe somebody is going to make a Storify. I know Maureen does some cool stuff, different tools that do tag clouds and things like that. And maybe by the time we get to about week 4, which is digital leadership, maybe then we put it out there and we say, hey, we've been things for archiving. Maybe one of the suggested activities is that participants try and do an archive themselves in whatever tool they like.
Yeah, I also like the idea of, even if there's something similar that we do each week, by saying, you know, starting our week with, for any of you that are looking for support or feeling lost, just know that we're all in this to help each other. So please jump in. If you've got an idea or if you've got a way of helping someone, even though there are co-conspirators, that we are all in here learning together, and that's a repetitive thing that we say every week, I think that might be helpful too, so that even if we've modeled a Storify once, then any of you who are willing to jump in during the week and do a Storify or any other way that you want to, you know, collate this week or to share what we've learned this week or whatever, feel free to jump in. We're all here to learn together, and if you need help, we'll help you along, or someone will help you. It may not be a co-conspirator, it just might be another participant who's willing to jump in.
Another thing Susan mentioned the other day was the idea of having scheduled hangouts that weren't really like a webinar, but just, hey, you know, maybe 1 o'clock. There'll be a hangout, pop in and ask questions or talk about the weekly topic. There'll be somebody there and converse with you.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Allison's she kind of got more of what I think Alec and I were talking about. So when you are in a face-to-face environment and someone gives you that right answer, you're like, yes, Johnny, not necessarily the way you always do your behavior, yeah, we know, but you do go, yes, Johnny, thanks for telling us, yeah, way to go, yeah, that's exactly what we're thinking, what do you think, Susie? You can't always do that in an online environment, and there is, regardless of what people may think, there is some facilitation to CMOOCs. And I've had many conversations with Cormier, Stevens, and Downs about this, especially with K-12 educators who are new to MOOCs. So I think that's what the daily Storifys or the daily summaries are about as well, celebrating the successes of people in an open way and talking about things that they're doing well, and that models, oh, look, they made it to hashtags. They know what a hashtag is. I don't know if you remember the first time anyone ever responded in Twitter or retweeted or that's what I'm getting at. Those moments of, oh my gosh, there's other people out there and they're actually reading what I'm doing and they're actually seeing. I think that's more where I was going with that.
Well, Verena, you've got to stop reading my mind. Just as you were talking about that first reaction to a tweet, I had just finished posting something, recalling how exciting it was. Actually, from Alec via Twitter. It was very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that and many of these people will be new, and so they'll be like, oh my gosh, they'll say, oh, Verena, you actually answered me, even though they'll like write that in the tweet, and I'll say, okay, yeah, just added a blog link, or like that moment, yeah. Or the first hangout, or exactly, whatever.
Verena, I think it brings up a really good point that maybe if we had a little tips for co-conspirators. Especially someone who has never been in a MOOC before. I think Paul just alluded to that. Like Alec would jump into a hangout. He would respond to a tweet. He would comment on your post. And that's all our responsibilities, not one leader as such. But if we had tips for co-conspirators and we could add some tips to those, I mean, of course, we're not going to maybe not be able to do everything, but we could try to do some of those things. But especially for those people who have never been in a MOOC before, I think that would be a really good thing to have.
And just going back into our group document and put
that's
under
a great
a list of co-conspirators.
I
was just adding something to say to develop, so I've made a note about the tip for co-conspirators for us.
Good.
No, that's a great idea because Dana Arliss, who was she just got home and she said, yeah, I'd love to be a co-conspirator, but what does it involve? So for sure we'll put that together. We also haven't done so yet, but we're going to put together a toolkit for participants similar to what OCLMooc and OOE had, so that in one place there's some instructions on, if I don't have a Twitter account, how do I join Twitter? How do I follow a hashtag? How do I create a Google Plus account? How do I add my blog to the blog hub? So we will have that, but I love the idea of also having one for co-conspirators.
With Paperlies, you have keywords, so you have to be a little more specific. Yeah, I bet we could do it. I just have it's just, they're very general, Paperlies, yeah. So, yeah. We could make them the hashtag helped out. There's ways to curate.
What is a paperly?
I'll get one for you.
Okay.
Yeah,
it's like a daily paper.
Yeah. And you get all sorts of ideas from it, and then you tweet it out. So it's just an accumulation of everyone else's tweets and tweet it out, except yours.
It's like a book thing, kind of.
Well, it's like a newspaper kind of, yeah.
Okay.
But then you get a tweet saying, oh, you're in this person's Paperly, and you get all excited, and then you go in and see it's got like 100 people in it, but that's okay. It's
I've also
proof of Paperly. I swear to gosh, Paperly made me stay with OCLMooc. My goal was always to get in the Paperly.
Exactly. I remember the feeling like, like the second day I was in OCLMooc, because I didn't join right at the beginning, I was in the paper, and like that was a really great kind of confirmation that I have something to contribute. So for sure, I think we should have a Paperly. If someone wants to step forward and have that be their co-conspirator role, that would be great.
I also have started, just for the co-conspirators, just for my own interest, because I'm trying to get everything together. I live bindered an OCLMooc live binder so that I know to go back for each of the documents. I know you can go back and get them all piecemeal, but or wherever. But anyway, it's helpful for me to have them all in one, so I can easily tweet that link out to all of you as well. And I'll try to keep that organized. Anything to do with the co-conspirators, I'll try to put in a live binder.
So I'm aware of the time, because these things always run long, but I'm also aware you all have lives. We seem to be kind of talking about this one thing that Verena was talking about when she first came on, that people are interested in being co-conspirators, but they might not want to take on responsibility for 1 week. That's when Paul was suggesting a new name for them. But different levels that people can be involved as co-conspirators. I do admit that in the back of my mind, I'm also thinking, like, if we wanted to go down the route of badgification and issuing badges, then clarity around different roles might be essential for that. And I'm just going to say, before I throw the floor open for you to comment on this, in terms of our agenda for stuff we wanted to talk about tonight, there was this topic we wanted to talk about. We wanted to give you a chance to ask your questions and answers. And then we were going to talk about next steps. And it looks like Danny's joined us. Welcome, Danny. We're happy to have you.
Sorry I'm late.
That's all right. We're glad you're here in your car. So we were just kind of, does anybody have anything else you want to say about ideas for co-conspirators, different levels, different ways people can be involved? Don't all talk at once. We've never seen that tonight. And of course, this isn't the only opportunity you have to participate. I think that kind of the main place that we'll be having some of these conversations is in that master Google Planning doc, and maybe I'll even add a section at the bottom there for ideas around co-conspirators. I'll mention again that hyperlinked in there for each week is your own planning document where you can start kind of planning with your group. Before I move it over to Q&A and next steps, anything else people want to say about co-conspirators and being involved?
Okay, I guess it's a question, so I can...
Go, Allison, go.
I'm not sure on the planning document, or if there isn't a planning document. I know that that it's connecting with SMooc, but it's a MOOC, so I guess it's a course. And I just wondered if we were gonna maybe do something about, like, sorry, I've lost the window where everybody is, so I'm just gonna talk now. About assessment at and maybe not of the students, but by students of the MOOC. Like, is it just going to be that kind of ongoing, like we're blogging and reflecting on that, or is there going to be something maybe at the end where they can contribute something about a reflection on the MOOC process and like what worked in the MOOC for them? Or I'm not really sure where to put that, but I feel like maybe
I think that's a great idea.
Like above the content of,
I think that's a
Connected Learn.
Great idea. Yeah, great idea. I really liked what Jeff Merrill was doing with his. He had a MOOC, and I liked when halfway through, Maureen, correct me if I'm wrong here, they did have a questionnaire that went out for participants about kind of the content and how the course was going, and they had another one at the end.
Well, you know, in fact, one of the things that Jeff did with his that I found really helpful was that he had almost a pre-planning thing, that when people came in, they were able to set some goals, and there was a sort of a survey questionnaire that took you through identifying a little bit of why you were there and what you were hoping to get out of it, and helped you also see some of the possibilities that might be there. They did a really good job of having it be really open-ended. And then they identified that for people there would be at least two more, one midway and one final, that completely optional, and your participation in the ETMOOC wasn't, well, or in the Exploring PLNs, wasn't contingent upon doing the survey. I did each one of them and found them to be useful, and it was sort of a way of giving you some guidance in some of the thought that was behind it, like scaffolding a little bit for you and going in and giving you the opportunity to really self-reflect.
Yeah, because, sorry, am I jumping in, Maureen? What I saw happen one time was that there were a lot of students new to MOOC, and they kind of joined, and in the orientation phase, they were still learning what a MOOC was. sorry, I'm shaking the computer. They were still learning what a MOOC was, and they are very familiar with social media. So for them, like when they came on, they all did a very good job identifying themselves. So what's my job and everything. But kind of when they were identifying what their goals were, which was supposed to be a self-learning activity, then they were saying, well, it's I'm here to learn, and they kind of listed off like some content that was in the MOOCs rather than like saying things that would help them find other people right away and help them be successful right away in connecting to that fewer group of people who join the MOOC that they're interested in. And I don't know if this is just that kind of MOOC where, well, that's what they're here to figure out, is that they should have been more clear right away, that people would remember them. Oh yeah, that's the person who wants to find other people to share OERs on math with, or something like that. But I kind of feel like maybe, I don't know if it's like something you guide somebody through, or that I'm not very good at ending sentences, just letting everybody know.
Well, that's one of our goals, Alison. At least one of my really strong goals is to connect Albertans with each other, so that at the end of this, if you're a grade 5 teacher, maybe you've met some others who you could collaborate and connect with. I'm cutting in and out. I think my kid went back on Skype.
I just found
I agree with. Sorry. I agree with you, Rhonda. I think it's nice to ask people at the very beginning to give a mini bio or a mini goal setting or self intro, because then when things are so big, then you can sort of attach yourself to one or two people that maybe you might be able to have something in common with, or start little mini conversations to get those relationships and connections going.
Mm.
And they could do that in the Google Plus community. That's what we did in the last, in OCLMooc. Yeah. We did that in the Google Plus community. Little bios, or if you had some goals there, you could write your goals, or what you wanted, or what you hope to get out of it, or who you hope to connect with. You could do that in the Google Plus community.
I kind of like the idea of having it in the Google Plus community, because Maureen and I were in the same MOOC, but she was more organized than me, and I actually missed the questionnaire. I knew it was there, and when I went to complete it, it had been closed, which makes sense. You know, you needed to close, and they wanted to tabulate. But then I kind of felt like I missed that opportunity. So if we had it in something like in the Google Plus community, then even if you join late, which you're more than welcome to do, you could still introduce yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And the Google Plus community keeps it like an open, continuous thing. So a month or two down the road, you can go back and flip through and be like, oh, that person said something really interesting. Let's try and connect with them now, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And worth mentioning, if you don't know this, I'm sure Verena shared this, we actually have 2 Google Plus communities. We have the co-conspirator community, and we have the MOOC. We're trying to keep them kind of separate so we don't confuse brand new MOOCies. I go by pictures, so the co-conspirator community, a picture of tree branches, and the other one is kind of more beautiful landscape of Alberta. But we'd love you to join both communities. Any other questions and answers? Oh, yeah, go.
Sorry, I just added that research because the primary question and research question was about goals in MOOCs. So I thought it was really interesting that you should bring that up. And I actually was part of the research. I was one of the participants, and then I did my own research afterwards and talked to them about it. But my answer was I didn't have any goals when I went into the MOOC. I had no idea what it was about. I just went in, and they asked me, why on earth would you go into something without having a goal? Like, they're like, well, maybe we need a different word. Like, why would you just do that? And that spontaneity piece, or the serendipity, hadn't really been examined at that point. So I totally understand where you're coming from, Maureen, talking about why why do we need everything to be random and let everyone learn by themselves? But the biggest reason people dropped out was because they had no idea what was going on and they couldn't connect with people, and regardless of their goals. So that's, I guess, where I'm kind of halfway. Halfway. You can't make people be in a MOOC. Totally understand that. But how do we encourage those who are dropping out due to frustration as opposed to those who just don't have time or whatever other reason? And that still hasn't been clarified.
I agree within what it is you're trying to do and within this framework. And this is just me exploring a little thread of something I've been thinking about. But I wonder if dropping out of frustration isn't sort of part of the process, and then you wait another however many months, and then you decide you're going to try again. And I know that that's not necessarily what you want within what you're trying to offer.
Right. Yeah.
But I know
that's the problem.
Yeah, I know very few people who didn't start Twitter and then completely abandon it, and then come back and realize, oh my goodness, this really has a lot more to offer, and that might be part of this learning cycle.
Yeah, totally agree. And so maybe we need to think about what our goals are as a MOOC, because I know that Rhonda and I have been talking, and for me, I kept saying, why do you keep putting connectivist in everything? Like, I don't understand why you keep putting the word, and no one's going to understand what it means anyway. And because it just blocks a lot of people for me. And so my goals are to get people online and engaged, but I totally agree. I wouldn't have got here if I didn't risk and fail and have to teach myself. So yeah.
Well, when I joined OCLMooc, one of the things that kept me going with OCLMooc, even when it was hard, was that people in OCLMooc were not being technical, were not using acronyms, were not using jargon. So I felt like no question was a dumb question. As a non-technology teacher, pre-technology integration, sometimes people would talk at a level so above me that I would just shut off. And so I think language really is very key and important if we're inviting new people in, to make sure that they're feeling welcome the whole time.
Great idea. I know I was just having Wi-Fi issues. Kids swear they're not on the Wi-Fi. But I know we're losing a few people, and I know we're kind of running a little bit over. And I'm so pleased Paul has said that he's transferring this to a shared document, because I've just lost the whole chat and all of those nice links.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. I think I've just heard
comments. Good morning. Go.
Well, I've just sort of heard something because that works in my brain, and one is that I think maybe they're two different things. One, feeling welcomed, and I think that we have to go overboard in making people feel welcomed. I think that's really important, and that's a really critical piece. I think the idea of helping, not helping, but of trying to navigate for people, or trying to be really directive in the navigation, is the part that I'm leery about, and I sort of see those as two different things. So how do we really welcome people, and they have a feeling of getting feedback and feeling included and encouraged, and not have things be so organized or so structured that all the navigation is done for them, even if that means it causes them a great deal of frustration. That's sort of what I'm thinking at the moment.
And I can hear what you're saying, Maureen. I'm also thinking about the time of the year that we're doing this MOOC, and we're doing it at the very beginning of the school year, when people are organizing a whole bunch of other things and have a whole bunch of other things on their plates as well. And so I know part of the learning process is getting frustrated. And so it's that total balance between making them feel like this isn't one more headache on top of what they're already trying to do right now, and giving them like the freedom to explore a little bit. So I'm not sure how to balance it.
Well, I think that's one of the value in having all of us involved. We all have different experiences, and we all have different things that are important to us. So one, it's fabulous hearing all of your ideas and input in this meeting, but I also think that that's going to be a value that you're all going to bring to the MOOC itself. So any other comments and questions before we wrap up and talk about kind of next steps in our next planning meeting? And we lose you all? So kind of next steps, get to know your planning group. If you're haven't yet been matched, made into a planning group, well, Rita might already do it, but if not, feel free to join a group or contact Rita and I personally and say, hey, I want to be involved. I'd like to be involved in this or that. But feel free just to go to the planning document and add your name in there. And start trying to book events during your week, because it's getting to be a busy time of year, and people's time is going to be booked up. And then afterwards, we can worry about kind of content for the week and activities and things like that. Of course, spread the love, share the connection for people to join, either as co-conspirators or just to join as a participant. And our next planning meeting is going to be another hangout, and goodness, by then it's going to work seamlessly, but it'll be Tuesday the 9th at 7 at night the same time, and we'll do another hangout on air at that time. I'm just going to pause here because I always talk over people. Any questions, comments, anything else we haven't mentioned we should? I hear some typing and I'm worried some people are frozen, so we'll just pause for a minute.
But it's not October.
Yes, you're right.
The other thing is, Rhonda, that in OCLMooc, we only had like 2 pre-planning sessions, and then we split up into our groups, and then we planned our own individual weeks. And I'm just suggesting it's really hard for everyone always to meet all the time, so I don't want to put any pressure on anyone, especially in September.
So this will, if you can make it, great, and if you can make it, it'll probably be our last major one, and then you'll start planning with your groups.
Because, yeah, that's where we want the emphasis to be. Yeah.
And of course, we're so happy you're involved, because we're really, really excited about this, and we're so happy to have your ideas and your participation.
Yeah, Allison, please add. Put comments in or add in things if you have ideas or people or whatever. Yeah.
All right, I'm going to push the stop broadcast button now.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean that we'll be disconnected.